I'm going to talk maybe a little bit too quick and with a lot of enthusiasm about research, how to do research or how I do research, the tools I use, how I go from step one, finding sources, primary sources, tertiary sources, secondary sources, and actually put those sources into something that's coherent and something that makes sense rather than just a load of random references, and bring it all together into maybe an article, an essay, a video like this, and trying to bring it together. So I'm going to go through that process, doing a bit of screen sharing as I go along. Finding sources, references, citation, synthesis, critique to whatever it is that you're writing can be the most fun but also the most irritating part of the research process. Now, for me, I actually use social media as part of my research process. Yes, some people may frown, but when you look at YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, there are normally lots of individuals on there that are talking about something. Yes, it's normally they're talking about a source that they saw, normally a secondary source, but it's a way to be exposed to lots of different things, and Wikipedia is actually a great place to find a lot of those secondary sources if you go all the way down to the reference page and you can see what's going on, assuming the article is actually a useful article, which in some areas they're not so useful. But once you have been exposed to maybe an effect, a theory, a hypothesis, something someone's talking about, you can then go look at secondary sources, which may be books or other conversations that have been cited and referenced, maybe even papers that are more secondary sources rather than primary because they're just articles of someone reviewing a topic or summarizing something, they're more secondary sources, but you can find those through the conversations on social media or finding a conversation that someone has had through a group or through a community, which is really useful in getting a high-level view of the actual landscape that you're looking at. Then when you dive down into the primary sources, you can still go back to what is actually going on. What is the point of me reading this? And for me, it does actually save me a little bit when I'm going through primary sources and I don't end up going down rabbit holes and going completely off topic because I can think back to where I first found this source. Is this now related to what I was finding in the first place? And a lot of the time I'm not, which means, okay, I'm going a little bit off track, maybe like this conversation. Now, where do I actually find these sources? I mentioned social media, and social media is a great place to get an understanding of what's going on, but most of the time people don't reference stuff. They don't put references in descriptions or in comments. They don't link to actual citations or actual blogs or anything like that. So what I actually do most of the time is I then go to Google and search whatever the topic is, find a blog. Most of the time the blog post will then link to an article, or I just go straight to Google Scholar and find the article. Now, I say Google Scholar, but I also use something called Research Rabbit, both of which in terms of search do the same thing, and for the purpose of finding something I would just need to find a link to whatever the article was, and then I will clip it to Zotero, which is technically a reference manager, but I actually use it as my storage of all of my articles. Once I finish the first section of source gathering, I'll then start reading through some of the articles, and I use Adobe Acrobat to highlight different points, and most of the time when I'm going through, I'm just highlighting points that are somewhat interesting or something that I could use later on, and maybe even references to a certain point that I could use in my secondary source finding. Now, what is that? Basically, when I'm going through an article, sometimes there will be points that are raised that they have referenced. Now, the point in the article isn't that explained. It's not explained very well, or it's just a reference point for something else they're talking about, but I want to know more about the topic, so I actually put that in my notes, in my Zotero notes, and find the article and put it in there. Now, this is where Research Rabbit actually comes in handy. Because I have my article most of the time in my Research Rabbit collection, I can go in, click on all references, and then just type in whatever the reference was, instead of having to go all the way down to the bottom of the paper, find the reference, type it in, then add to Zotero. It's already there, so I will have Research Rabbit up on my other screen, and then I'll just click all references, type in whatever it is, click through the article, read the abstract a little bit, maybe to give me a little bit of an understanding of what the point is, what the article found. Maybe if there are 2 or 3 different articles that have been referenced in a point, I can see what the differences are straight away, rather than just reading through the paper and having to go back a second time. It gives me a bit of context when I'm reading through the paper the first time through. Then I can add those to Zotero if I actually want to read them later on, and add them into my secondary source finding. Once I've read through the paper and I've done all of the highlights, I've done a bit of secondary source finding, I will then export all the highlights in Zotero to a note file, and then I'll export that through MD Notes into my note taker. Now, the reason I left note taker a little bit later on in this video is because I actually use Obsidian for the note taking of all my tertiary sources as well. Now, I have them, all of my tertiary sources go into Obsidian, because what I then get is I then get a big processing note, is the word I call it, but it is basically a note of a load of different sources sources, videos, articles, blogs, tweets, things like that are related to a topic. Now, if lots of people are talking about something, there is obviously going to be attention there. And if there is attention there, there is normally a source somewhere to the point. Maybe it's a book that's been written, an article that's been written, and loads of people are talking about a topic. Or it's something of interest in the social domain, which means there's going to be some sort of research somewhere. So I can then condense all of that in the processing node and find some information that actually references it, or realize actually there's a gap in the research here. People are just talking about a load of stuff and it's not referenced. Why are they talking about it? Then I can critique it and try and understand what is going on, and potentially even find some issues with something, maybe fake news that's going on, but I wouldn't know that unless I've condensed all the tertiary information together to try and get through some of the bias. Now, most of my sources are audio sources because I'm not a big fan of reading, so I will listen to podcasts through Spotify or I'll watch videos through YouTube, and when I'm actually reading the articles, I don't actually read the articles. What I do is I have them split. I have two screens. I have the article in Adobe Acrobat up on one screen, and then I have the article also up in Speechify. Now, Speechify is a paid application, but I then listen to the article going through on my headphones, listen to it, and then I just highlight things going along. So I don't have to focus that much on the words that's going on because I struggle reading words and actually understanding what I've read. So I'll listen to what's going on and then highlight things as I go down, so I can get through papers much quicker. Something else I do when reading papers is I will read the introduction, then I will go all the way to the bottom and read the conclusion, then I will go back up and read the literature review, then go down and read the discussion, and then the results, and then the methods. That's my process of going through papers, because if you go all the way through the paper, find a conclusion, and it was kind of like a waste of time, well, you've wasted half an hour potentially reading a paper that you're not going to use. So I look at the conclusion to see, okay, what is actually going on? What do they find? Is it interesting? Find the lit review, because the lit review is normally where I find all the secondary sources. When it comes to writing up what I found or condensing a lot of that information, the sources, the references and things together, so I understand what's going on, or I'm trying to plan out an essay, I will actually add tasks to my to-do list, which is on Todoist, and I will actually block it out in times on my calendar so that I know roughly what's going on where. So I'm currently in the process of doing a PhD, which is a massive project, but doing lots of different things at once is just impossible. You can't do everything at once, so I will plan out certain sections, and maybe I'll go through a video of how I'm doing that. Let me know in the comment section if you're interested, how I'm planning everything out. But what I would do is I'll plan it out in my to-do list, in my calendar, and go through all the different sections that I want to work on. And when I'm going through these sections and writing things up, as I would imagine most people have, they have something to help with spell checking. Now, my spelling is beyond atrocious, so is my grammar, so I use Grammarly to help me out, because if I didn't have Grammarly, most people wouldn't understand what I'm writing. And the other application I use on a daily basis is Morgan. It's on my computer, and it links up essentially my to-do list, so Todoist, and my Google Calendar. It puts them together in time blocking, so I can just quickly Alt-C on my keyboard to see what's going on and what I'm meant to be working on at that moment in time. Now, there are plenty of alternative tools to all of the ones that I have suggested, but these are the ones that I'm currently using. I am also still using Notion on a collaborative basis, so whenever I'm working with someone else, I will use Notion. When I'm working by myself, which is what this video is focused on, I will use all the tools I've mentioned, and if you want to know where all the tools are, I've left links in the description to all of the tools I have mentioned.